south of Brazil is being ravaged by torrential rainfall and floods. The death tally is around 150 and counting, with over 600,000 people displaced from their homes. Rainfall has continued over the past few days, and it remains impossible to say that the worst is behind the region. Authorities, meanwhile, are battling another beast: disinformation. Falsehoods around how the government is aiding municipalities, managing donations, and regulating rescue efforts are crippling the official response to the tragedy. Moreover, several false emergency reports have been filed, mobilizing the already scarce resources for nothing. This week, we will talk about how an undisputed tragedy has turned into a culture war. My name is Gustavo Ribeiro. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Brazilian Report. This is Explaining Brazil. If you like Explaining Brazil, you should subscribe to our website, which is the journalistic engine behind this podcast. You can also go the extra mile and make a donation to our newsroom, buying a cup of coffee for one of our journalists. And God knows, reporters live off coffee. Our biggest enthusiast has definitely been a reader called Carson Allen, who has made multiple donations of dozens of cups of coffee at a time, and his tab includes over 100 cups of coffee. So Carson, thanks a lot, and to everyone else, be more like Carson. And you can also subscribe to our Buy Me a Coffee fan page, pledging a monthly contribution to our newsroom in exchange for exclusive content that you will not find anywhere else. Our Buy Me a Coffee subscribers are, besides of course Carson Allen, Wild Rice, Jaciada de Oliveira, Gabriel Luca, Andrei Novoseltsev, Pen Ludwig, Leslie Seal, Mark Hillary, Luis Hans, Erwin Menais, Aaron Berger, Kars Vresvik, Alistair Townsend, Miller Renascido, Peter Abrahamson, David Dixon, Jose Jose Stankovic, Emerging Market Muser, Anna Lund, Peter Suffering, Anderson da Silva, and someone who chose to remain anonymous. And if you too want to support independent journalism and hear your name on our podcast, head over to buymeacoffee.com/Brazilian Report. This week, we welcome back an old friend of the show, Mário Sérgio Lima, a senior Brazil analyst at Medley Global Advisors. Mário, thanks for being here with us.
Thanks, Gustavo. It's always a pleasure.
So, Mário, we're discussing one of the biggest climate tragedies ever to occur in Brazil, with scores of deaths, widespread human suffering in the country's southernmost state, and yet the topic of this week's episode is disinformation. So what on earth is going on there?
Well, there's amid this tragedy, of course, in this kinds of events, it's normal that you would have, I wouldn't say like, you would have misinformation at some point, but it would be like, people saying something at some place, and then you have to call this as it is, because I mean the sources of information are several. So people on the ground, people who know people that are on the ground, people who just have people who have lost a lot, people who know people who have lost a lot. So it's difficult to actually know what's going on for sure. And also you have to consider that when you're there on the ground, you will be having partial information, even if it's just what you're seeing. What you're seeing is not really what's happening elsewhere. It's a huge state, by all means. So that was bound to happen. The problem is there's clearly an effort to misinform, to disinform the population. And this comes, unfortunately, from politically linked groups, because there's an idea that everything should be disputed, as narratives, and rather than limiting this to what should be, I would say, a positive political dispute in which you have a lot of lawmakers who are opposition to the current government, either on state level, municipal level, and federal level. I mean, it's more than expected that they would be pressing the government to act, to do the best that it can, and also to oversee the spending and the effort. So that, I think, it's good politics, but that's not what we're seeing. We're actually seeing people just basically creating facts and just basically spewing narrative, which is not helping the people that are in need. Actually, it's making the case worse for a lot of those people, just for political gains, and that's part of what's. I mean, tragedies like this bring up the best and the worst on people. I would say that this is bringing out the worst.
Now, these disinformation networks are not necessarily trying to deny that the floods in Rio Grande do Sul are linked to human-made climate change. Maybe also because, according to a recent poll, 99% of Brazilians actually do believe that these floods are a byproduct of climate change. Rather, we're kind of seeing this information about the political side of this crisis, right?
Yeah. I mean, I do expect that at some point, what you mentioned, the discussion on whether or not those climate extreme events are directly linked to human activities. I mean, I think that, and of course, when the discussion comes, there are a lot of people who are negationists, but I do think that those people will eventually come to the discussion after, I mean, the water just have been absorbed and people are starting to rebuild. I think that's when those people will get to the point. But what we're seeing is like basic lies, like, oh, the government, some people in the government are not allowing the aid to come to the people in need. They are borrowing trucks. They are rejecting offers of help from other nations and other states. And this creates, I mean, when you're putting out this kind of disinformation, especially in a moment when people are very sensitive, and of course they are. I mean, more than 100 people were almost heading to 200 people lost their lives on that tragedy. The economic losses that will come from this are also huge. So of course people are completely sentimental and all. And that's when those, I would say, like those fake news ghouls come and try to disseminate disinformation to actually rile up those people who are already in a vulnerable state, not only physically, but emotionally and also materially vulnerable. And they're riling those people up in a way that they're just trying to get political gains, which, I mean, it's not the time and it's not the manner in which those things should be done.
Now, lots of well-known people have pushed misinformative content. Elected officials, Dunga, the captain of Brazil's 1994 World Cup winning football team, he said that bureaucracy was keeping him from donating food to victims, which was debunked. But you claimed in an op-ed for the Brazilian Report that arguably the biggest figure in this far-right fake news wave is a man called Pablo Marçal. Can you tell us a little bit about him? Because he does sound like a character.
Yes, thinking about foreign listeners, I would compare Pablo Marçal to Tony Robbins in a sense that, you know, he's a kind of a self-help guru. It was never clear why would people start listening to him in the first place. But I mean, there's marketplace for this sort of self-help, life coach type of people. And I mean, it is what it is. But this guy is huge. This guy has millions and millions of followers on his social media. If you have every one of his profile pages, you would see like I don't know, something north of 10 million people in all of the social media websites. So I mean, the guy is very big. He actually tried to run for president in the former election. He couldn't manage to do so because his then party decided to support Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva pledge. But Pablo is a very far right individual, and then he became like he ran for federal deputy, federal lawmaker. He was elected, but then the federal the he basically ran into some fouls with the electoral court, and then he was barred from taking office. But basically, the guy is a super spreader. I mean, he has a somewhat of a very loose grapple on reality. He mentions, he always says like if you take his words into on face value, you would think that if with a couple of months of boxing training, he could knock out the heavyweight champion of the world. It's a kind of a bullshit artist that he is. And he became infamous. I wouldn't say famous, but infamous outside of this bubble of influence that he has. He became infamous because I believe it was in 2021 or 2022. I don't remember the year exactly. He brought some of his followers to the peak of a mountain in one of those struggles. Oh, you will overcome. You have to do things to overcome what's holding you back. You know, like this kind of life coach type of event. And then those people, the climate conditions were terrible. People say, "Hey, you shouldn't go there. You shouldn't go there." He went anyway. Those people were trapped in the top of the mountain, had to be rescued by security forces. Also, there was an individual that took part of an impromptu marathon that he did, really like running marathon that he did. The guy took part of that. He wasn't fully physically fit for this kind of task. So he eventually had a heart stroke and died. So I mean, at some point, you know, this kind of people can have dire consequences. But and in this specific case, he has been super spreading a lot of those fake information, and he has been doubling down. Even if people say that he's lying, he's doubling down, and he has a lot of people that listen to him. So without any sort of commitment to truth and responsibility, I mean, it's there's no accountability, you know, Gustav. That's, I think, it's the main issue here. When media, you could say people call the legacy media or the institutional media and all, when those people make mistakes, I mean, they have a lot of ways to try to avoid making mistakes, a lot of checks and balances internally, always striving to get the best information. But even then, with the fast information that you need, real-time information, they make mistakes. They have to own up to those mistakes. And that's what make this kind of commitment and accountability, which is key. Those people, they have none of that. They can say whatever they want, whenever they want. And I mean, the consequences, it's almost like they don't need you to respond for the consequences. And I think that creates a very asymmetric field that really, it's asymmetric to the favor of the misinformation rather than the right information.
And not to make excuses for disinformation, but do you think the federal government could be doing more to show how it is helping Rio Grande do Sul? Because, I mean, sometimes it kind of feels like they're leaving space for false narratives to flourish?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I do think that there, partially, yes. Partially, I think the government should be trying to tackle this directly. They are putting up some websites and try to fight disinformation and try to respond as fast as they can. Which, I mean, it's almost like like banging a whiplash to the sea. It's not going to be making a lot of. But anyway, it's something. Yeah. I think that they probably, I think they probably need to be more close to the ground. I mean, I'm not just saying like the military men that are helping. I'm actually saying like Lula and its ministers, they really need to be as close as the ground and to the people as they can to try to convey the message. I know it's hard, but it's something that they need to do. But anyway, I think it's very difficult to fight disinformation because this kind of infrastructure of disinformation was put in place by the far right, and they really had a lot of time to build and to keep this thing flowing. So, I mean, when Bolsonaro was president, he had like the Gabinete do Ódio, like the hateful cabinet, which were a group of people that were doing this kind of effort. But it's naive to believe that those were the only ones. I think even if there's a centralized type of nervous system to this kind of to try to sell those narratives and disinformation, it's still very difficult to combat because it's very widespread. A lot of people are doing, and a lot of people are just like forwarding the misinformation without checking, which it's kind of who is actually responsible, who should you and even like the idea of let's investigate and create some probes against those people. I mean, yeah. I mean, legal repercussions should happen when you're doing taking a bad faith argument. But it's also like a slippery slope, because if you really try to suppress this kind of information, which, like I said, can be really widespread into several actors, even like people who are just supporters and not really politicians or anybody that has personally some power, you really run the risk of being too authoritarian in trying to suppress any sort of information. Because let's be honest, there are reasons to believe there's some information that comes that are not what the government wants to see published may be true. So you can't just like forcefully force down a narrative also. It's a difficult situation, but it's clear that I believe that the government is not doing whatever it can. Although I do believe that once the water comes down, and then like those relief packages get into the pockets of people affected, I think this will create some sort of goodwill towards the government and everything. But in this first moment, it's very difficult to actually gain a lot of favor when it's happening.
Of course, this disinformative campaign is not just directed at Lula and the federal government. And it's important to note that Brazil will have municipal elections later this year. So there may be mayors in Rio Grande do Sul running for re-election that will use this crisis to promote themselves, or conversely, challengers trying to use the situation to bash incumbents, right?
Yeah, I mean, there we've seen some of them. Like I don't when one of the mayors, like, it was so blatant that the guy was lying. He had a doctored video of his call with a minister that he was basically like seemed like he was putting the heat on the minister, but the minister also was filming on the other side, and he released the full video. So you see, like, the mayor was blatantly lying. But the thing is, how much would that affect? It's difficult to say because depends on which of the information travels faster and reaches more people. I tend to believe that the false information tends to spread faster because it regenerates more like the sentiment that it generates. It's something that's easier to forward rather than like a more cool down look and see, hey, let's compare and see who's lying. So, but I mean, what I lament, Gustavo, is that all in all, after the water comes down and the people start getting putting the piece together of their lives, I don't believe that the necessity of discuss whether our own infrastructure is really sturdy enough to face what is becoming ever more frequent extreme weather extreme climate events. I don't think that this is going to be when people are casting their vote. I don't think that this is going to be the main issue that they're looking, or even, I mean, maybe not the main issue is the idea. It's like maybe even not an issue when they're casting their vote. I mean, we're seeing this, and we're seeing like the rural caucus in the Congress really passing a lot of legislation that has a potential to harm the environment in the medium to long term. And you really don't see this kind of discussion really gaining momentum when it's the most important, when people are actually casting their vote. I mean, in Rio Grande do Sul, theoretically, after this disaster, people would be saying, hey, in these elections, we need to vote in candidates that have a proposition to tackle this situation. I'm not saying like vote left or vote right or vote center, because this should be taken into the hearts of every one of the people running for election. And even if they have different views on how to tackle the situation, at least they have a plan to actually do this, to actually allow for funds to not be diverted from this kind of worry. But to be honest, I'm very pessimistic. I don't think when it's when it comes to the time of voting, people will be distracted by other factors, which can be really important, like like public security, which we know that is not really a mayor's job, but it's elections. Everything is put into place when people are voting, even if it's not what is immediately in the hands of the mayors. Other types of issues like inflation, joblessness, or any type can be more prevalent in people's minds rather than discussing and tackling some public policies that would help avoid or at least mitigate future types of future tragedies like this. I'm very pessimistic, Gustavo.
I want to go back to the culture war issue that we're discussing, because one of the recurring slogans we've seen is, quote, civilians are helping civilians. Now, that might be a dig at the armed forces, right? Because the far right has called the military traitors after they did not support Jair Bolsonaro's coup attempt and did not intervene when Lula was elected. And now let's remember, Rio Grande do Sul is a massive supporter of Jair Bolsonaro, right?
It's the civilian aid, like volunteer aid and people donating. And this has been actually people from everywhere in Brazil are donating. Companies everywhere in Brazil are trying to show, even if it's just for show, they're trying to do something for Rio Grande do Sul. So, of course, in every type of tragedy like this, you need, especially in this first moment, those will be the people that are actually going to be holding the fort. So, but the way that they present this as a narrative is like, okay, we're doing this, and the government's not doing anything, and nothing is happening, and I mean, which is a lie. Let's be honest, it is a lie, because the aid is coming from other states through the armed forces, aeroplanes, from the national postal office. Like, of course, there's already the government, the federal and the local government really operating. And after the tragedy, that's when most of the help is going to be coming, not from civilians, but from the government. So it's like, it would be great if we were just like really putting a word of respect towards the volunteers and towards the sentiment that's propelling Brazilians nationwide to help Rio Grande do Sul, and for the local heroes that are really taking time from their own lives to help other people, to help other lives. So, I mean, kudos to them. We really should value what they're doing. But it's like, you take something that should be positive, which should be like, let's create unity. Let's say, oh, we are doing everything, so we are all one in this moment, and they're taking this as a means to instigate those people against the government. Which, I mean, it's like even if it seemed well intentioned, it's sad really that they need to resort to this, and nothing is achieved afterwards when you take this approach. That's the real answer.
Mário Sérgio, thank you a lot.
Thanks, Gustavo. It's always a pleasure to speak to the Brazilian Report.
Mário Sérgio Lima is a senior analyst at Medley Global Advisors, and if you like Explaining Brazil, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. Or better yet, you can subscribe to the Brazilian Report, the journalistic engine behind this podcast. We have a subscription-based business model, and your memberships fuel our journalism and keep us going and growing, and our work has been recognized for its quality. We have won several international awards. Most recently, we were named the best news website in the Americas for a small or local newsroom by the World Association of News Publishers, (ONE-IFRA). To continue doing this work, we need your support. Go to Brazilian.report/subscribe. I'm Gustavo Ribeiro. Thanks for listening. Explaining Brazil will be back next week.